So, again, inference is the best explanation. What we find in Scripture, basically, are the sorts of beliefs that were commonplace at the time, both scientifically and morally. And it seems to me that's surprising if, in fact, it is inspired by an omniscient, morally perfect being. You would expect there to be signs of that in Scripture, and I don't see that.
And really quick, just to follow up on what you know, and how you responded to my point, I mean, I just think it's preposterous to say, you know, that we would really believe that it's, you know, cosmic, some kind of cosmic force that's aligning the stars in just the right way. I mean, that's fine if you want to characterize atheists as that. I mean, but it's really a caricature of what an atheist really is and the way we, you know, rationalize. You know, and that's fine. Again, you're right. I don't know for sure if I saw that skywriting, if I would really believe it's God, or maybe aliens using some kind of beam to move the stars around to play a joke on us. You're right. Maybe I would believe that. I can't prove that I wouldn't. I can't prove it to you. But all I can say is that really, I mean, what is more likely here? What is more likely that atheists would see that as? I mean, I would propose, you know, the individual to really answer that for themselves. I think it's a caricature for you to say that atheists are that skeptical.
Well, it's funny you should say that there should be aliens that we may ascribe belief to, because that's exactly what some in the scientific community are doing. Panspermia. There's the idea that design explanations are perhaps the product of cosmic astronauts. Think of von Däniken. So you say that, but it's happening. On the other hand, I just want to point out that in terms of what about, should the Bible, that's a separate question. Should the Bible do that? I think that's highly controversial, but I think that it actually has. Like with respect to the opening verse of Genesis, right? In the beginning, God created. The universe began to exist was against all lights of the ancient Near Eastern cosmologies. According to the ancient Near East, whether it's Akkadian or Sumerian or Egyptian accounts, they all say that the universe had a primordial existence, a state of chaos that existed for eternity. Even Christians absorbed that later on. In the Middle Ages, you see Aquinas and others who just assume the universe is eternal. But not until we get to modern science with Friedman of Lemaitre and Einstein, and then culminating in Edwin Hubble's discovery in 1929 about the universe began to exist. Well, no wonder Stephen Hawking says it smacks of divine intervention. Now it's tipping its hat toward that the universe began to exist, something that appears to have been reckoned by the Old Testament all along.
I mean, you know, yeah, you can find all kinds of passages in the Bible and say, you know, that, you know, that is proof that they had advanced scientific knowledge. You know, if you tweak the phrasing in the right way, you know, God, you know, said that there'd be light. See, that was a beginning. They knew that the universe had a beginning. Sure, you know, you can say that, but you know, I could also say, you know, religion that says, you know, the universe lies on a turtle's back. Well, there, you see, like that somehow shows.
Mike, this is exactly my point. You're always going to find an alternate explanation. So why should I think if there's a display of God, you won't reinterpret that?
I mean,
well, it's a bit of a stretch to say that. I mean, look, all forms of theism are claim the universe had a beginning, and that's what this deity is. So, I mean, that's not something completely unique to Christianity, and it's a bit of a stretch to say that God created the heaven and earth in 7 days. That's the Big Bang Theory being predicted right there. I mean, that's a little bit of a stretch.
Well, it is more sophisticated than that. It's not based on the 7 days. It's when God is the subject of bara in the first verse of Genesis, it's about, it says the heavens and the earth. And that was just ancient speak for the universe. They didn't have a word for universe as such, that's what it was.
really quick, I mean, what about this? What if we say, all right, let's just use as, you know, a measure whatever the orthodox scientific principles are, you know? What is you know, a majority of scientists think, you know? And we can use that as a measure and say, you know, they are looking for truth, objective truth. They're not being overly skeptical or, you know, overly, you know, irrational. Either way, they're what we should use as a measure. You know, let's look at what they say. You know, and a majority of them believe in Big Bang Theory, evolution, things of that nature. You know, it's you know, a fraction of a percent that, you know, don't believe in evolution, for example. Let's just use that. You know, if you want to characterize atheists, please characterize us as using scientific method. And if God revealed himself in a good enough way for it to become the orthodox scientific view, for example, if I lived maybe 200 years ago, then maybe I would say it's rational to be a Christian because it seems it's the orthodox scientific view, to be a Christian, and then I would be. But because of the day we're living in today, the time we're living in, it's just simply not. God has not, he needs to reveal more of himself than now, because as of right now, it's not enough to convince a majority of the scientific community.
We'll give you guys the last word if you want to add something.
Oh, I was just going to say that that's, again, perspectival. You don't see the evidence, but I think it's out there. I think we have good reasons. But you mentioned evolution. That was going to be something else I was going to bring up. Is that for Augustine in the early 5th century, talks about these, this, what he called the rationis emanalis, these potencies that unfolded over time. What's interesting is that in his commentary on Genesis, he says, listen to this, he says, but from the beginning of the ages, when day was made, the world is said to have been formed, and in its elements at the same time, there were laid away the creatures that would later spring forth with the passage of time, plants and animals, each according to its kind. Some of God's works belong to the days in which he daily fashions whatever evolves in the course of time for what I might call the primordial wrappers. This is 1,500 years before Darwin.
So I guess Christians should embrace Darwin after all.
There's a difference between embracing the Darwinian evolutionary theory and the philosophy of Darwinism.
I think we're going to cut that off there and move on to the next question. Okay, and in order to leave time for an audience Q&A, this will be the last question that you guys get to ask, and then we'll have time for brief questions.
I'm just going to ask the straightforward question on the bottom. A lot of this has been discussion about worldviews, but let's cut to the chase here and let me just press. Since it doesn't follow from objections to Christianity, like the doctrine of hell or questions of the hiddenness of God, none of these, even if we just absorb the criticism tonight, would not lead us to atheism. So let me just ask a straightforward question. What grounds then do you have for being an atheist?
Yeah, actually, I think that that's wrong. I actually think that objections to the existence of something, reasons for not believing that something exists, like a theistic God, are reasons for not believing it exists. And that's kind of atheism towards that being. So, it's like asking me, okay, there are a lot of arguments out there for not believing in unicorns, but is there a specific anti-unicorn argument you can think of? Besides the arguments that are used to suggest that unicorns don't exist, is there a specific argument for anti-unicornism itself? And I think when you say, well, no, I think that it's sufficient. When you're talking about the existence of something, the rational thing to do is to ask if there's sufficient evidence for believing in that thing. And if there is no sufficient evidence, or if there are not sufficient arguments for that, then the rational thing to do is to not believe in it. And that's in fact the stand that most of you take to a wide array of different sorts of deities, all different sorts of gods, all different sorts of supernatural beings. You don't believe those things exist. And you don't feel like you need to have a specific argument